Welcome to this video on the Contax ST camera. The Contax ST was the replacement for the Contax 167MT. It was aimed at the amateur market. It is a manual focus camera with program modes and dual metering modes that takes lenses of the Contax Yashica line, made by Carl Zeiss, Yashica and other manufacturers. Introduced in 1992, the camera has a built-in winder capable of 3 frames per second. There is also motorised film rewind. The film speed range is 6 to 6400 ASA in 1/3 of a stop increments. Metering is centre weighted or spot metering. Exposure compensation is provided plus or minus 2 stops in 1/3 stop increments. The range of shutter speeds is from 16 seconds to 1/6000th of a second in P and AV modes, 1 second to 1/4000th of a second in the rest. The shutter speeds are stepless. In addition to 2 program modes, aperture priority, automatic mode and manual mode are also provided. Shutter flash sync is 1/200th of a second. An exposure lock is provided which locks the exposure value in spot metering mode. Also there is battery level display. A remote release port is also provided for Contax electronic cable releases and compatible accessories. There is also a depth of field preview button. Interchangeable focusing screens are supported on this camera. The main controls on the Contax ST are the on-off switch, the exposure compensation dial, the ABC selector, the LCD screen, the ISO button, the drive mode button, the rewind release, the shutter speed wheel, the mode selector switch, remote release socket, the viewfinder cover, the data back, the light button used to illuminate the LED and dial settings, the mode selector lock button, PC sync socket. On the front of the camera are a depth of field preview button on the bottom of the lens mount, a lens release at the top of the lens mount, and an LED for the self-timer. On the bottom of the camera is a tripod socket and a screw that releases the battery compartment cover. The bottom plate of the camera unscrews with the edge of a coin and the battery compartment is underneath. The camera takes 4 AAA batteries. The main on-off switch goes off, on centre weighted metering, on spot metering, on auto exposure lock, which saves the exposure value and is always spot metered. The exposure compensation dial is simply rotated to adjust the exposure value used. It can be adjusted in 1/3 stops to plus or minus 2 stops the metered value. The automatic bracket control is specified by rotating the lever around the exposure compensation dial. The values are the same for all the automatic camera modes. The winder supports single frame advance or continuous advance. The camera also has an electronic self-timer. The LED on the front of the camera flashes while the electronic self-timer is in operation. The camera mode is changed by pressing the camera mode selector lock button and rotating the camera mode selector while holding the lock button down. Modes are program, TV, AV, manual and bulb. In TV or manual mode, the shutter speed is set by rotating the shutter speed wheel. rewind the film, the button is held down and the slider slid across. The film speed can be set automatically using the DX code, or can be set manually using the ISO button. To manually set the film speed, hold the ISO button down until the LCD display starts blinking, and then use the up ISO button or down drive button to change the value to the desired one. Half pressing the shutter release changes out of ISO setting mode. The drive mode is set using the drive button. Operations are S, C and self timer. To change the drive mode, hold the drive button down until the LCD display starts blinking, and then use the up ISO button or down drive button to change the value to the desired one, as with the ISO button. When operating in program modes such as TV mode, where you set the shutter speed and the camera sets the aperture, it is a requirement to set the aperture to the minimum value shown in green on series lenses, f16 on this lens. Older AE lenses without the minimum aperture marked in green do not work in program modes, only in AE or manual mode. The ABC mode enables a series of 3 exposures to be taken, one at the set exposure value and one each above and below the metered value by the exposure bracket value. The bracket is set using the dial. 3 frames at 0.5 stops bracket. 3 frames at 1 stop bracket. The cable release and other accessories plug into the port on the back. There is a built-in diopter adjusted via a dial on the pentaprism. There is also a viewfinder blind. In addition, there is a PC sync port for use with a flash that does not use a hot shoe. You have to ensure that the shutter speed is 1/200th of a second or lower. The camera has built-in Ttl Flash Metering for use with the Contax flashes that support it. It is compatible with TTL operation with later Contax flashes. The camera supports second curtain sync with flashes that support it, such as the TLA 280 shown here. It has fail-safe flash shutter speed synchronization when used with Contax flashes. This auto sets the shutter speed when not in manual mode when the flash is fully charged. Other flashes can be used in non-TTL mode. The viewfinder illustration from the brochure is shown here, and the viewfinder displays the aperture and shutter speed in use, along with a frame counter and an indication of whether exposure compensation or spot metering is in use. There is also a flash ready indicator when using Contax flashes. There also acts as a confidence light when using TTL mode. The camera borrows a lot of its layout from the RTS3 and can be thought of as an RTS3 Lite. It has the ceramic pressure plate of the RTS3. The camera has a useful range of shutter speeds up to 1/6000th of a second and has 2 metering modes, so it is still a useful camera. The user interface is much improved over the 167MT, and later Contaxes followed this pattern. The ISO and drive mode buttons are small and a bit fiddly to use, and their mode of operation is a bit odd. The viewfinder uses an oversized pentaprism and is very good, and gives consistent results in bright light when focusing from either near or far with an f1.4 lens mounted, if the microprism collar is used. The Contax ST supports the cable switch S and cable switch L types of cable releases. In addition, remote controllers such as the infrared controller S can be used with them. A magnifier or right angle finder can be fitted to the viewfinder. There is a data back built in which can print the date or time between the frames, and a battery pack and 5 different focusing screens are available. An extra optional data pack was also available with extra functions. In addition, they can be used with the Auto Macro Bellows PC. Within their limitations, they work very well. I would be careful to find one in good condition if considering buying one, and we consider getting it serviced and the light seals checked.